Well, I think that the Evolt is an especially exciting option at the primary level. One of the interesting things is that next year in states across the country there will be Democratic primaries for president. And so Barack Obama, who is certain to be the Democratic nominee, will be unopposed or very underopposed on those primary ballots. I think that's an especially creative place in which to throw a write-in candidate in. The same being true in the Republican primaries, unless of course you want to vote for Michelle Bach. But this idea of trying to send a message through the election process is a powerful one, and it's an important one. And what really excites me, what excites me the most by any measure, is this idea of national policy referendums. I think that's a fantastic proposal. The fact of the matter is that there's countries around the world that put major issues to referendums, to initiatives, so that the citizens can weigh in. You'll see that in Europe all the time on questions of whether to join international groupings or regional groupings. You see it in Switzerland all the time on every issue from right to die to language rights to whether to distribute heroin needles to heroin addicts. They vote on all sorts of referendums there. And what I think is really troubling to me is that in the United States, we often have policy referendums at the local level, sometimes even at the state level, but we do not have it at the national level. And I go back to the views of Robert M. La Follette, the great progressive in the early years of the 20th century. La Follette believed very strongly in national initiatives and national referendums. In fact, he proposed before World War I that Woodrow Wilson should have a national referendum on whether to go to war.
But I do believe that we need to find a way to get citizens more involved on these issues. Part of my frustration of Afghanistan has not just been the kind of what I perceived as an indifference in Congress, but even amongst the American people. The fact of the matter is that we don't have a draft. People aren't even paying for the war; it's going on our credit card, and so the war's kind of gone on for 10 years, and here we are. Borrowing $8.2 billion a month just for this war in Afghanistan, losing some wonderful men and women, and this terrible war. And, it's starting to get a little bit of recognition, but it's late in coming, and we need to find ways to plug people more into these big policy decisions.
Well, let me say that you are the first person who has talked about a plan to try and get corporations and huge amounts of money out of our electoral system. So I appreciate that, and I'm hoping that you will blossom. I haven't had time to read through the referendum. I'm probably approve of most of the things here as I'm looking through the list. I'm concerned about putting a write-in vote for anyone, particularly where an election is terribly important.
Well, I think it's an excellent idea, especially on the referendum. And for President, I absolutely agree with you that a paper trail with a write-in ballot, or a ballot in which one can actually make a physical mark and have that traceable with my name would be incredibly important.
Well, I think it's important to get knowledge on the subjects you care about. And when you find out what people are really interested in, and then get those who are seeking to win public office to respond to what you want to hear rather than what they want to say, it gives, I think, you empowerment to be able to make better choices as to who can represent you in high offices.
As somebody who comes from Washington State, where we have ballot initiatives and allowed direct democracy, I think that having mechanisms for direct democracy is a good thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of the questions on the ballot are quite valid, and I think the idea that there would be a ballot in general that has those kinds of questions, rather than just being the New York Times or Fox News calling you, have across the board those questions be asked in a way that the politicians have to be able to respond to. I think it's a great idea.
How do you build a system of democracy that can wrestle with the biggest questions beyond the process ones? So Bill Clinton, one of his best lines ever was, "There's nothing wrong with America, what's right with America can't fix." So let's make sure. Do we have the processes of decision making now to help us address our biggest questions? And do we have, and I think biggest among those is the engagement of our citizenry. And so, speaking about about having a national system of referendum, I would think about a few things. First, opening up the process a little bit, very good. Having a little more power wielded by people including unelected people, good. The balance that I think you are trying to strike by not having a petition system, I think is also good. The question I would have is, how do the campaigns look? How do those campaigns get funded? And are we likely to get answers that reflect people's sober second sense?
Have principle, like if this is what a reflection of the people's will, I think that has tremendous value instead of just supporting one party or the other.
I think it's essential that the decision makers know what the American people want, how they feel, and what their opinion on the critical issues before us. I think there would be more clarity to it. It's a double-edged sword. Sometimes some of us might hear something we don't want to hear, but democracy is a system that requires that public opinion and the public good be at the forefront, and this could be one mechanism to at least have a serious understanding of what people are thinking on the critical issues that we face.
Young people are more in favor of gay rights. They care more about the environment. They're friendly towards unions. So yeah, I think there's a lot of latent potential there that we saw pieces of that in 2008, and you just have to figure out how to constantly engage them. And I think this is one of the ways to do it.
Well, I think that we, as many snapshots as we can get about what the concerns, the priorities, the way American voters are thinking about the world they're in, and the very hard choices that they're making on budgets and on values and on what we're doing in the world. It's good to get a snapshot of where people are. That doesn't mean we turn policy to automatically meet these things, but it shows us what our challenges are in educating people across all political lines. So I'm a big fan of doing something along the lines of the National Policy Referendum, and I commend you for doing it. So.
One of the things that we have to consider is trying to get more people to vote, not only in presidential elections, but on the off years.
Like, especially for youth, like with an issue like gay marriage or the environment or something like that, you can really get a lot of people out there. Like, if it's something simple and easily articulated. One of them, would be like get out of war in Iraq and Afghanistan.
There is an absolutely essential need to educate citizens and to engage citizens in the political process. And if we are going to have an honest democracy, we'll have to do something like what you say. I hadn't heard of that before. It's the first time I've heard of it today. But that is the kind of action that's needed. To do that, it will have to be carefully designed. And to do it right, it seems to me, you have to work at a higher level of engagement. It isn't simply a passive kind of facts and rules engagement, but it's an engagement with the political process so people start to understand how the government works, what the role of politics is within an entire society, and their responsibility to be informed citizens.
Well, I think that anything that is designed to educate voters and people in the population, period, is very advantageous. We use a little slogan in Jackson. We say we have to educate, motivate, and organize so that the people must decide. And the only way that the people must decide, or the only way the people will be able to decide, I should say, is if they're educated. So I think that the idea of referendums or questions posed which people can get the answers to and then discuss and make issues out of, I think it's an excellent idea. I believe that any type of information gained in that way will certainly help educate the population so the population can make informed decisions.
We need you to tell the American people this, because you know what? There's some guys out here who want to control the message. They don't like that internet thing because they can't control the message. And if you and I are talking about one America, they want to say, not just one America. They want to get me and you arguing among one another. They want to say, well, you know what? Liberty get justice for all is fine, but
Seems like a potentially valuable thing. Generate discussion, gauge how voters feel about the critical issues. I mean, and if anything, it'll be great guidance. You know, a few caveats though. I mean, one, you don't want it to ripen into a referendum because I think California has shown us how, you know, governing by referendum can be problematic.
Questions?
That's how you get your candidate to really expose himself on where he stands on policy. And this is one of the big problems we have. When we have a candidates forum, the questions are prearranged and nothing comes out about policy. And I think this is a good idea.
I think it's a great idea. Anytime you can reciprocate the accountability and agenda for the United States of America, it's a good thing. And so putting the responsibility not just on those elected, but on us ourselves to take some responsibility in the things that are on the agenda for our country. So it's a great idea, great thing.
I think that's an excellent idea. I don't know why no one has done it before. Well, I suppose it's because it's logistics would be difficult. I mean, it'd be nice to get people in nursing homes to vote and people who, you know, either don't know how to do an absentee ballot or an early ballot or come to the polls. It would make it easier for them too. And I think it's a great idea.
Well, no, I think opening up politics to a lot more people and a lot more candidates and ideas is something we need to do. We really need to open up our politics, and so that piece I agree on, and I think it would be really interesting to do a national policy referendum. The key is to make sure we get people educated about, you know, what the issues are. But I would say that most people in this country, if they were to be able to vote directly on something, I think would vote for more progressive, more equality, more fairness in the policies we pursue, and so that would be very appealing to me.
Well, an informal national policy referendum through polling, such as this, is a good idea. A formal government-run national policy referendum, I would not support. That's like the referendums you have in California, and too often those kinds of referendums are won by whoever has the most money.
Except that this is a policy referendum. I agree with you. I'm from California. We make terrible law by initiative. But I'm saying as a policy guidance for our government for the next 4 years.
Guidance makes sense as long as there's nothing binding about it. Can't hurt.
My job is job title is also the responsibility as representative, and this ability to use that input that's coming from people, I take it very seriously. You have golden opportunity if you're doing this job right, and you're using those online letters that come in, those phone calls, or those grocery store visits we do where people walk up and talk to you. You're becoming better informed and do your job better. You're not only getting the opinions of that individual person, you're learning about those issues. So
I think it's an intriguing suggestion. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I think what you're getting at is trying to get to that point where elected officials really are connecting and reflecting what the people really want to see instead of the divisive issues or issues that aren't really there. So I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I'm intrigued by the idea, because anything in my job that gets more in touch with what people are truly feeling, what they're seeing, not just what my ideas might be, is, I think, a good thing. So I'd be very interested in spending time looking at it. So.
Policy referendum definitely seems like a more fine-tuned democracy and a better, clearer way to communicate to our president exactly why we put him in the office and what we expect from him.
I think that having a blank spot on the ballot is fantastic, because you might not want to vote for Sarah Palin or Obama. You might not want to have those two things as your choice. A write-in candidate, a true grassroots candidate that is not owned by pharmaceutical companies and Goldman Sachs, I think that is a fantastic opportunity for a grassroots person to stand up and almost win. I don't know if they can win, but it's a start.
Your analogy of one person turning into a flow of water and overwhelming another entity, I think is a very good idea.
Some things we do know, that people movement does work, and that as we combine people in coalitions in order to fight against injustice, that does work. And as we pass on the legacy to stand for justice and not to surrender to fear to our children, that will work.
Letting the people weigh in that way, I think it's very powerful and very useful. And let me give you the core reason why I think it's so powerful. And that is because so often we have unfocused debates about issues. We end up off on a side area rather than focusing on the core of it. So if we had a referendum in this country before the Iraq War saying, how do people feel about it? Do you want to go to war? Don't you want to go to war? Then the debate would be very, very focused. It wouldn't go to the side issues, it would go to the heart of it. Similarly, do you want to get rid of Medicare? Don't you want to get rid of Medicare? When you go to those heart and soul issues, I think it's much easier to frame the debate, to have a real discourse in the country. I think it forces our media to step up to the issues rather than to go off on side tracks and deviations. So there's a lot to be said for this, and I hope that the Evolt folks get a good hearing and get their message out across this country, because Robert M. La Follette, the great progressive, was right. The cure for what ails democracy is more democracy, not less. The problem in America right now is we have so many places in which we're diminishing our democracy. I'm excited about any effort that seeks to expand democracy.